She agreed to a contract marriage and ended up saving his life. Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us return to our main character. The night rain drummed softly against the glass windows of the late-night cafe, turning the city lights outside into blurred ribbons of gold. Linh Nguyen sat across from a man whose presence seemed to command the entire room without a word. Adrian Voss, 35, CEO of Voss Capital, a man whose face often graced the business magazines she stacked at the bakery she was about to lose. His suit looked like it cost more than her shop's monthly rent, but his expression tonight was colder than the rain outside. Lynn's hands trembled slightly as she stirred her untouched tea. Her apron still smelled faintly of vanilla and flowers. She had come straight from work after receiving his call. You said you needed to discuss something urgent, she managed to say, her voice soft but firm. Adrian leaned forward, his eyes unreadable. Yes. I need a wife. Lynn blinked, certain she had misheard him. I am sorry, what? He slid a thick envelope across the table. The corner was embossed with the Voss Capital seal. Inside were typed pages, crisp and heavy. A contract marriage, he said. 6 months. Appear with me at public events, maintain the image of stability my board demands. You will be compensated, of course. Lynn stared at the envelope, her heart pounding in disbelief. You cannot be serious. Completely, he replied without hesitation. You will receive $300,000 when the contract ends. Enough to pay your debts and keep your bakery. The words hung in the air, unreal, tempting, impossible. She had spent the past month fighting eviction notices, tax penalties, and sleepless nights trying to save the small bakery her late mother had built with her bare hands. And now, this stranger, this powerful man was offering her salvation wrapped in a deal that sounded almost cruel. Why me? She whispered. You could choose anyone. Adrian's jaw tightened. Because you are honest. You were the only vendor at that charity event who did not try to impress me. You just handed me a slice of pie and told me I looked like I needed to eat. A faint blush crept up her neck. She had said that half joking, half pitying. He opened a leather folder and placed a simple silver ring on the table beside the papers. Its reflection caught the soft cafe light. You would wear this. We keep it simple. 6 months, appearances only. No expectations beyond what is written here. She hesitated, glancing between the ring and his eyes. So this is just business to you? At first, he said quietly. Outside, thunder rumbled low, as if echoing her hesitation. Lynn took a deep breath, trying to steady the swirl of fear and practicality inside her chest. And if I say no? Adrian's gaze softened for the first time. Then I find someone else, and your bakery closes next week. The clock above them ticked to midnight. Lynn's reflection trembled in the dark window, her tired face framed by the neon glow. Somewhere in that reflection, she saw her mother's smile, the woman who used to tell her that kindness would come back someday. Maybe this was it. Maybe not. But she was out of time. Her fingers brushed the cold silver ring. All right, she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. I will do it. Adrian exhaled, the first sign of relief breaking through his composed mask. He reached out his hand. Then, Miss Nguyen, welcome to our agreement. The rain outside fell harder, streaking down the glass like ink, while two strangers sealed a deal that would change both of their lives forever. The next morning, Linh Nguyen stood at the edge of a long marble hallway that gleamed like glass. The air inside Voss Tower smelled of fresh lilies and polished stone. She could still hear Adrian Voss's voice from last night echoing in her head. 6 months. Appearances only. The contract was real, signed, and sitting in her worn leather bag. She should have felt relief, but all she felt was the heavy thump of her own heartbeat. An assistant in a navy suit appeared, clipboard in hand. "Mrs. Voss?" Lynn almost corrected her, then stopped. "Yes," she replied softly. The woman smiled politely. "Mr. Voss is waiting for you in the boardroom." Every step Lynn took across that endless hallway made her feel smaller. When the glass doors opened, Adrian was already standing there, his phone pressed to his ear, giving sharp, precise instructions. His posture was perfect, shoulders straight, jaw set. When he saw her, he ended the call. "You are early," he said simply. "I could not sleep," Lynn admitted. Adrian studied her for a moment, then nodded toward the folder on the table. "Your identification has been processed. Legally, as of this morning, you are Mrs. Adrian Voss." Lynn's stomach tightened. "Just like that?" "Just like that," he confirmed. A photographer entered, followed by a stylist and a makeup artist. Adrian's tone shifted to professional. "We need pictures for the announcement. It goes out this afternoon." Lynn blinked, her voice barely steady. "Pictures?" He gestured toward the backdrop. "Smile. Or at least try to look like you are not being blackmailed." His words were teasing, but his expression was unreadable. Lynn forced a nervous laugh and stood beside him. The photographer adjusted the light, guiding them closer. Adrian's arm brushed against hers. The contact sent a spark through her chest she could not explain. "Closer, please," the photographer said. Adrian placed his hand gently at her waist, professional yet careful. The flash went off. The entire moment felt unreal, like a scene borrowed from someone else's life. When it ended, Adrian handed her a small black card. "This is for you. A driver will pick you up each morning. You will have access to the penthouse kitchen if you wish to continue baking. Do not feel confined. The staff has been informed." Lynn took the card, noticing her name engraved beneath the logo. "You thought of everything," she said. "That is my job," he replied, his voice low. She hesitated before asking, "Do you do this often? Make deals like this?" His eyes flickered with something, pain, maybe, or memory. "Only when I have no other choice." Later that evening, Lynn walked into her small bakery one last time. The smell of sugar and cinnamon hung in the air. She ran her hand over the counter where she had learned to knead dough beside her mother. The bank's notice still sat on the door, but now, she had the means to make it disappear. Her assistant, May, looked up in confusion. "Lynn, what happened? Are we saved?" Lynn managed a small smile. "For now, yes." May frowned at the ring on her hand. "Did something else happen?" Lynn hesitated, glancing at the silver band. "It is complicated." When May left, Lynn stood alone in the quiet shop. She thought about Adrian's face, calm, disciplined, lonely in a way she had not noticed before. Somewhere between the ink on a contract and the flash of a camera, she had stepped into a world that did not belong to her. Outside, the city pulsed with light and motion. Somewhere high above those streets, Adrian Voss was already planning the next board meeting, already moving on. But as Lynn locked the door and looked back at the darkened bakery, she whispered to herself, 6 months. I can do this. Yet deep down, a voice she could not silence asked, and what if 6 months is not enough? The rain began again, gentle and endless, washing the city clean, while 2 lives, one built on power, the other on hope, started to intertwine in ways neither of them could yet imagine. 3 days later, Linh Nguyen stood in front of the mirror in the master bedroom of the Voss penthouse, the city's skyline reflected behind her like a second world. She had traded her flower-stained apron for a cream-colored dress that fit too perfectly to feel real. The wardrobe consultant had spent an hour explaining which designers to wear, which shoes matched which tone, and which posture to maintain when cameras were around. Yet as she smoothed the fabric nervously, she still felt like an imposter in someone else's story. Adrian Voss appeared at the doorway, already dressed in a tailored charcoal suit. He paused for a second, his gaze taking her in without a word. "You look fine," he said finally. "Fine," she echoed with a faint laugh. "That is all?" "If I say beautiful, you might think I am lying," he replied, straightening his cufflinks. "Ready for your first official event?" Lynn nodded, though her throat felt dry. As ready as someone can be for pretending to be a millionaire's wife. "Correction," he said, offering his arm, "you are not pretending. You are my wife for 6 months, legally speaking." She took his arm, trying to ignore how steady and warm he felt beside her. The elevator ride to the lobby was silent except for the soft hum of the music. Outside, a sleek black car waited, the driver already holding the door open. As the city lights blurred past, Lynn turned to the window, her reflection merging with the skyline. "Do you ever get tired of it?" she asked quietly. "The suits, the speeches, the pretending." Adrian's jaw tightened. "It is not pretending. It is survival." His tone ended the conversation, but the weight of those words lingered. At the Helios Energy Gala, chandeliers glimmered like constellations, and the air buzzed with champagne laughter. Photographers turned as they entered, flashes chasing them across the red carpet. Lynn smiled politely, rehearsing every gesture Mara had drilled into her graceful wave, brief eye contact, controlled smile. Adrian's hand rested gently on her back, a subtle signal guiding her through the crowd. "Remember," he murmured, "these people smell weakness." "Then I hope they are all congested tonight," she whispered back. His lips twitched, the closest thing to a smile she had seen. Halfway through the evening, an older investor's wife leaned close to Lynn, her diamonds catching the light. "So, dear, which boarding school did you attend?" Lynn froze for a heartbeat before replying, "The kind where you learn to make apple pie instead of Latin." A few guests chuckled. The woman blinked, unsure if she had been insulted or charmed. Adrian's hand brushed Lynn's wrist under the table, just a brief, silent approval. For the first time that night, she felt like she belonged. Later, during the charity auction, Lynn watched Adrian move through the crowd, commanding every conversation with quiet authority. She noticed how he paused slightly before shaking hands, how his gaze never lingered long enough to reveal emotion. It was all calculated precision, efficiency wrapped in charm. When the auctioneer announced a bid to fund the children's hospital, Lynn surprised herself by raising her paddle. $10,000, she said, her voice clear. Adrian turned sharply toward her. "You do not have to, I know," she said. "But I want to." The room erupted in applause, assuming generosity, not realizing the irony that she did not even own a car. Adrian leaned closer, his voice barely audible. "You just spent the first month of your salary." Lynn smiled. "Then I guess I will bake for you longer." For a second, his expression softened, something almost like pride flickered in his eyes. When they left the gala, the rain had begun again, soft and silver against the pavement. Inside the car, silence wrapped around them like a fragile truce. Lynn leaned her head against the window. "For a fake marriage," she murmured, "tonight felt surprisingly real." Adrian looked at her, his reflection mirrored in the glass. "Do not confuse kindness with reality," he said quietly. "Reality has rules." But as the city lights slid across his face, Lynn thought she saw something break through his carefully built armor, a shadow of loneliness he could not quite hide. The car drove on into the rain, carrying two strangers bound by paper but tethered by something that was beginning to feel dangerously real. The next few weeks blurred into a rhythm neither of them had expected. Mornings began with Linh Nguyen in the penthouse kitchen, the scent of cinnamon and coffee drifting through the air, mixing with the hum of the city below. She had asked for permission to use the space to bake, and Adrian Voss had agreed without hesitation. Every morning, she would leave a small box of pastries on the marble counter before heading out to meetings or foundation visits. At first, Adrian never mentioned them. But one morning, as she passed his office door, she heard his voice low and calm on the phone, followed by the sound of a quiet laugh, his first since they met. "Yes, the croissants are homemade," he said to someone. My wife insists on feeding the entire building. Lynn smiled to herself but did not enter. She had learned that Adrian's world functioned like clockwork, precise, predictable, disciplined. She fit into it like a note in a symphony she did not compose, soft enough not to disturb, warm enough to fill the silence. One evening, they attended a formal dinner with the board of directors. Lynn had memorized every name, every talking point. The chandeliers sparkled above, but the tension at the table was heavy. A board member named Claudia raised her glass and said with a smooth, cutting smile, "Mr. Voss, marriage seems to have softened you. I never thought you were the type to fall for sentiment." Adrian's expression did not waver. "It is called balance, Claudia. You should try it sometime." The table went silent for a beat before polite laughter broke the tension. Lynn glanced at him under the table, her hand brushing against his by accident. He did not pull away. When the dinner ended, Adrian led her to the rooftop terrace where the city stretched endlessly beneath them. The night air was cool, the skyline shimmering in gold. "You handled yourself well," he said quietly. "I was terrified," she admitted. "You did not show it." He leaned against the railing, his gaze distant. "That is the trick. Never show fear. Never let them see weakness." "That sounds lonely," she said. He hesitated. "It is." The honesty in his voice startled her. For a long moment, they stood in silence, listening to the hum of the city. Then Adrian turned to her, his tone softer. "You remind me of something I forgot." "What is that?" "What it feels like to trust someone." Lynn looked up, her heart caught between disbelief and something deeper she could not name. "You hardly know me." "Sometimes that is the point," he said, his eyes meeting hers. The air shifted, charged with something unspoken. Then a cold breeze swept across the rooftop, breaking the moment. Lynn stepped back, her pulse racing. "It is late. We should go inside." Adrian nodded, his mask of composure sliding back into place. But as they walked toward the elevator, his hand brushed hers again, brief, hesitant, real. That night, Lynn lay awake in the guest room, staring at the ceiling. She could still feel the warmth of his touch, the sound of his voice echoing in her mind. What it feels like to trust someone. She turned on her side, her eyes catching the faint glow of the city through the window. For a man who had everything, Adrian Voss carried an emptiness that went far beyond wealth. And for a woman who had almost nothing, Lynn was beginning to wonder if she had stumbled into his life to fill that silence or to lose herself in it. Outside, thunder rumbled in the distance again, soft but growing, as if the universe itself was warning them that no contract, no matter how carefully written, could protect a heart once it began to feel. By the time autumn settled over the city, Linh Nguyen had learned how to navigate the rhythm of Adrian Voss's world. Their public appearances had become effortless performances, each smile rehearsed, every gesture timed. Yet between the photographs and the board meetings, something unspoken began to take shape. They still called it a contract, but neither of them could deny that the lines were blurring. One Friday evening, Adrian invited her to a charity banquet for the Voss Foundation. The ballroom glittered with gold and crystal, and the air smelled of roses and champagne. Lynn's silver gown shimmered as she entered beside him, her arm linked with his. Cameras flashed, reporters called their names. To the world, they looked perfect. Inside, the tables were crowded with investors, politicians, and socialites who whispered behind polished smiles. Lynn did her best to keep her composure, remembering Adrian's words, "Never show fear." As the evening progressed, she found herself seated beside an elderly donor who was coughing quietly into a napkin. Without hesitation, Lynn reached for a glass of water and gently placed it in his hand. "Drink slowly," she said softly. The man smiled in gratitude, his eyes bright with surprise at her kindness. Across the table, Adrian noticed. His gaze lingered on her for a moment longer than necessary. Later, when it was his turn to speak, he adjusted the microphone and began his remarks about the Foundation's mission. But midway through his speech, he paused, his usual precision replaced by sincerity. We talk about innovation, he said, but sometimes, the smallest act of compassion is the most powerful form of change. He looked directly at Lin as he said it. Applause filled the room, and Lin's cheeks flushed. When the event ended, they walked outside into the cool night air. You surprised me tonight, she said quietly. You sounded human. Adrian chuckled, a low, genuine sound that warmed the space between them. Do not tell the board. They might revoke my title. She laughed, then stopped when he reached for her hand. You are not what I expected, Lin, he said softly. Neither are you, she replied. They stood beneath the city lights, the distance between them shrinking until only the sound of rain remained. But before either of them could speak again, a voice called from behind. Mr. Voss. It was Claudia, her sharp heels clicking against the pavement. The board needs you to review tomorrow's press release. Adrian released Lin's hand at once, his expression tightening. Send it to my office, he said curtly. Claudia's eyes flicked toward Lin, a smirk tugging at her lips. Of course. And Mrs. Voss, lovely dress. I hope the foundation's budget can handle your taste. The insult landed lightly but cut deep. Lin forced a polite smile. Do not worry, Claudia, I only wear what I bake enough to afford. Adrian's eyes glinted with amusement as Claudia turned away, her composure cracking. When they got into the car, Lin let out a shaky breath. I should not have said that. You should have, he replied. You were perfect. The car drove in silence for a while before he spoke again. My mother would have liked you. She believed in people who worked with their hands. What happened to her? Lin asked. Adrian's gaze stayed on the rain outside. She died when I was 16. A fire. I was supposed to be home, but I stayed late at school. I built everything after that to make sure I never felt powerless again. Lin's chest tightened. Without thinking, she reached across the seat and touched his hand. He did not pull away. You are not powerless now, she said softly. You just forgot how strong kindness can be. For a moment, the facade slipped. The mighty CEO looked simply human, tired, broken, searching. And as their fingers intertwined, the line between contract and connection quietly disappeared. Neither of them noticed the figure watching from across the street, phone in hand, taking photos under the flickering streetlight. The next morning, sunlight poured through the tall windows of the Voss penthouse, illuminating the breakfast table where Linh Nguyen sat quietly with a cup of tea. The air was calm, but her thoughts were not. She could not stop replaying the moment from the night before, the warmth of Adrian's hand in hers, the look in his eyes when he spoke of his mother. Something inside her had shifted, something dangerous for a woman living on borrowed time in a marriage built on paper. Adrian entered the room dressed sharply as always, but there was a softness in his tone that she had not heard before. You should rest today, he said. You were impressive last night. Lin looked up from her tea. You mean I did not embarrass you in front of your investors? Adrian allowed himself a faint smile. Something like that. He hesitated, then added, Claudia will host a private dinner tomorrow for the board. She insisted we attend together. Lin nodded slowly, though she sensed the tension behind his calm exterior. Is she always that friendly? Adrian's eyes darkened. Claudia wants control of the company. She will use anything to get it. Even us. His words hung in the air like a warning. Later that day, Lin went back to her bakery for a few hours. The scent of flour and sugar grounded her in a way that no penthouse ever could. May greeted her with a hug. You are glowing, she teased. Lin laughed softly. It must be the oven heat. But when she looked at her reflection in the glass display, she saw what May meant. Her eyes were different, brighter, uncertain, alive. When evening came, Lin returned to the penthouse. She found Adrian standing by the window, staring out at the skyline. The lights of the city reflected in his eyes. You ever wish you could start over? She asked. Erase everything and just be normal? Adrian turned to her. Normal is a privilege people only appreciate when they lose it. He motioned for her to come closer. You are not like the people in my world, Lynn. You do not pretend. That is why they will never understand you. And you, she asked. Do you understand me? He took a long pause. I am trying. For a heartbeat, the world outside seemed to disappear. Then the quiet hum of Adrian's phone shattered the moment. He stepped aside to answer. Yes, I will review the files tonight, he said. But Lynn noticed the sudden tension in his shoulders. When he hung up, his face had turned pale. What is it? She asked. Just business, he said too quickly. Nothing you need to worry about. Lynn knew he was lying. The next evening, at Claudia's dinner, the tension became visible. The long table sparkled with silver and crystal, but beneath the elegance was an undercurrent of rivalry. Claudia, dressed in red, welcomed them with a smile that did not reach her eyes. Mr. and Mrs. Voss, she said sweetly. How lovely of you to join us. I was just telling the board about your unique arrangement. Lynn's heart skipped a beat. Adrian's expression hardened. Careful, Claudia, he said evenly. Defamation is a poor business strategy. Oh, I would never defame, she replied smoothly. I was merely expressing admiration. Not every man can separate love and convenience so perfectly. The table went silent. Lynn felt heat rise to her cheeks, but before she could speak, Adrian reached for her hand under the table. My wife and I have nothing to prove, he said calmly. Now, shall we focus on business? The rest of the dinner passed in forced civility, but when they stepped outside into the cool night, Lynn could feel his anger simmering. She knows something, she said. Let her play her game, Adrian replied. I will end it soon. As the car drove them home, Lynn looked at him in the dim light. You trust me, right? She asked quietly. More than you think, he said. The answer should have comforted her, but instead, it filled her with fear. Because deep down, Lynn knew that trust was exactly what could destroy them both. Somewhere across the city, Claudia made a call, her voice low and satisfied. He has no idea what is coming, she whispered. And for the first time, Lynn's heart trembled not for herself, but for the man she had promised to marry only on paper and was starting to love for real. The following week began like any other, but unease lingered in every corner of the penthouse. Adrian Voss had grown quieter, distracted, his phone calls shorter and his temper sharper. Linh Nguyen noticed the dark circles under his eyes, the way he sometimes pressed a hand to his chest as if steadying himself. When she asked if he was all right, he would simply say, it is just stress. But Lynn knew better. Something was wrong. On Friday morning, the foundation's staff prepared for the largest charity gala of the year, an event meant to showcase Adrian's leadership and seal a multi-million-dollar partnership. Lynn had baked 300 pastries for the occasion, insisting on doing it herself. You do not have to, Adrian had told her, watching her hands move with calm precision. I know, she replied softly. But I want to help. That night, the ballroom glowed with light and applause. Reporters crowded the entrance, and cameras followed every move. Lynn stood beside Adrian, smiling through the flashes, her heart thudding beneath her gown. Yet beneath the glamour, she could sense the storm gathering. Claudia was there, of course, her red dress like a warning. She greeted Adrian with a smile too wide, a tone too sweet. You look pale tonight, Adrian. Are you feeling well? Perfectly fine, he said, though his voice was tight. Lynn felt the tension in his arm as he led her toward the VIP table. During dinner, Adrian's assistant placed a cup of tea beside him. Lynn noticed the faint scent of almonds and froze. Her mind flashed back to their first meeting, to the small detail in his file, his allergy to almonds. Adrian, she whispered urgently, do not drink that. But he had already lifted the cup halfway to his lips. Lynn reached out, knocking it from his hand. The cup shattered, drawing startled gasps from nearby guests. Claudia's eyes narrowed. What on earth are you doing? Lynn ignored her, her pulse racing. He is allergic, she said quickly. Adrian blinked, confused. I did not order anything with almonds. Someone did, Lynn said, scanning the staff table. Adrian started to respond, but his words faltered. His face had gone pale, sweat dotted his brow. Adrian! Lynn cried as he stumbled, clutching his chest. Chaos erupted around them. Call an ambulance, someone shouted. Lynn dropped to her knees beside him, her training from years caring for her brother kicking in. Stay with me, she whispered, fumbling through her clutch for the EpiPen she always carried. The guests had drawn back in horror, flashes from cameras still going off as if this were just another show. Lynn pressed the injector against his thigh and pushed. Adrian gasped, air returning to his lungs in short, uneven bursts. His eyes met hers, terrified, vulnerable, human. It is all right, she said, tears streaming down her cheeks. You are safe. I have you. Paramedics rushed in moments later, but Lynn refused to let go of his hand. As they lifted him onto the stretcher, Claudia stood frozen, her face pale under the bright lights. Lynn turned to her, her voice steady despite the tremor in her chest. Someone tried to kill him, she said. And I am going to find out who. Outside, as the ambulance doors closed and sirens filled the night, the world of lies and contracts they had built began to crumble. But in that moment, none of it mattered because love had just saved his life. Hours later, the sterile hum of hospital machines filled the private suite where Adrian Voss lay unconscious. The fluorescent light painted his skin pale, and each slow beat from the heart monitor echoed through Linh Nguyen's chest. She sat beside him, still wearing the now wrinkled gown from the gala, her hands clasped tightly around his. The doctors had said he would recover, that her quick action had saved his life, but the words did little to quiet the storm inside her. She kept replaying the moment, the scent of almonds, the way his body went limp, the terror in his eyes. Someone had tried to kill him, and Lynn knew exactly who had the motive. When the door opened, Claudia stepped inside, her perfume sharp, her expression carefully composed. You should go home, Mrs. Voss, she said smoothly. The staff can take it from here. Lynn rose slowly, her eyes cold. Do you enjoy pretending to care? Claudia's smile faltered. I do not know what you mean. You do, Lynn said, her voice steady. You have wanted his position for months. You changed his schedule, interfered with his meetings, and tonight, you arranged his drink. Claudia laughed, but it was brittle. That is absurd. Why would I risk everything? Because he trusted you, Lynn replied. And people like you mistake trust for weakness. Claudia's expression darkened. Careful, Lynn. You are just the hired wife. When this little game ends, you will go back to your bakery, and no one will even remember your name. Lynn stepped closer until their eyes met. Maybe. But tonight, everyone will remember who tried to kill him. At that moment, the door opened again. Adrian's lawyer, accompanied by 2 security officers. Lynn handed him a small glass vial she had taken from the gala's service table. The residue inside smells like almond extract, she said. Test it. Check the security footage. Claudia's face drained of color. You cannot. I already did, Adrian's lawyer interrupted coldly. The footage shows you instructing the staff to switch the syrup in his tea. You are finished, Claudia. For the first time, fear flashed in her eyes. She turned toward Lynn, her voice trembling. You think saving him will make you one of us? You will always be beneath him. Lynn did not flinch. Maybe. But I would rather be beneath him with honesty than above him with poison. The officers escorted Claudia out as her protests faded down the hall. Lynn turned back to Adrian's bed, tears finally escaping down her cheeks. She reached for his hand again, whispering, You are safe now. His fingers twitched, weak but real. Slowly, his eyes opened, unfocused at first, then finding hers. "You stayed," he rasped. Lynn smiled through her tears. "Of course I did." He tried to speak again, but she stopped him gently. "Do not talk. Rest." Adrian's eyes softened, his voice barely audible. "You saved me." "You saved me first," she whispered. Outside, dawn broke over the skyline, painting the hospital walls in gold. The contract that once defined them meant nothing now. Between the heartbeat on the monitor and the warmth of his hand, they both knew the truth: this was no longer an arrangement. It was love, undeniable and real, born in the chaos and sealed in the quiet of a hospital room. 2 weeks later, the city had returned to its usual rhythm, but for Adrian Voss and Linh Nguyen, everything had changed. The scandal surrounding Claudia's arrest had shaken Voss capital, yet it also revealed who truly stood for integrity. Adrian had publicly resigned for a short time, citing the need to recover and refocus on what mattered most. The board begged him to return, but he refused until every safety protocol was corrected and every employee treated with fairness. His first official act after recovery was not to host another gala but to visit Lynn's bakery. The bell above the door chimed softly as he stepped inside. The familiar smell of cinnamon and sugar filled the air. Lynn looked up from behind the counter, surprise flickering across her face. "You should be resting," she said, wiping her hands on her apron. Adrian smiled faintly. "I am. This place feels more like healing than any hospital room." She laughed quietly, her heart still not used to the way he looked at her. "No one armored, open." "The board wants me to come back," he said after a moment. "But I told them I will only return if they support the community program you wanted, the one that funds small family bakeries across the city." Lynn blinked, her throat tightening. "Adrian, you do not have to." "I want to," he said simply. "You saved my life, Lynn. Now I want to build something that saves others." He stepped closer, placing a small velvet box on the counter. Her hands trembled as she opened it to find the silver ring from their contract. Only now, it held a small diamond in its center. "Our deal ended the moment I woke up in that hospital," Adrian said softly. "But I do not want this to end. Not the marriage, not you, not us." Lynn felt tears blur her vision. "Are you asking me to start over?" "Yes," he said, taking her hand. "No contracts. No deadlines. Just a promise." The bakery was quiet except for the hum of the oven. Outside, the morning sunlight spilled through the window, catching the edge of the ring as he slid it onto her finger. "I loved you before I even realized it," he whispered. "You reminded me that power means nothing without purpose." Lynn smiled through her tears. "And you reminded me that love is not something you earn, it is something you choose." Months later, at the reopening of the community oven project, hundreds of people gathered to celebrate. The press called it a symbol of rebirth, but to Lynn and Adrian, it was simply home. The framed newspaper photo from their first gala hung on the wall beside a new one, Adrian in rolled-up sleeves handing bread to children, Lynn laughing beside him. At the end of the event, as the lights dimmed and the crowd faded, Adrian wrapped his arm around her and whispered, "Do you remember the night we signed that contract?" Lynn nodded. "I thought you were the coldest man I had ever met." He smiled. "And I thought you were the bravest woman I had ever known." She leaned against him, the scent of fresh bread and hope surrounding them. "We signed a contract to keep up appearances," she said softly, "and ended up finding something real." Adrian kissed the top of her head. "No contracts this time," he murmured. "Just forever." The camera of memory lingered on their intertwined hands, the silver ring catching the last golden light of day, proof that love born from circumstance could grow into something lasting, something true, and something worth every risk they had taken to find it.